Yeah, explain to me again why this was not robbery.
New police body cam video shows Ruby Franke's husband Kevin after her arrest, police storming the Franke home, and the recovery of 2 other Franke children. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Well, we've got some fascinating new body cam footage in the Ruby Franke case that we want to get into. So Franke, of course, is the former YouTuber who doled out parenting advice, only to now be charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse with respect to 2 of her young children. This happened after her children were found in the home of her business partner and now co-defendant, Jodi Hildebrandt, in Ivins, Utah. The son, who actually escaped the home and then ran to a neighbor who called 911, he was found emaciated with wounds and evidence that he'd been tied up. The daughter reportedly found in similar condition. We don't have official confirmation of that, but we do know that she was taken to the hospital to be treated for malnourishment. But now we want to get into this video, or these videos, I should say. So first of all, there is brand new video from police in Springville, Utah, that gives us a little bit of insight into how Ruby's husband, Kevin Franke, was acting after his estranged wife was arrested. So to help me talk about these videos, I want to bring in right now a special guest. I'm joined right now by Brian Schnee, who is an anchor and reporter from KUTV2 News. He has been covering the Ruby Franke case. And for anybody who's been following the Ruby Franke case, they should know Brian. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Always happy to talk about something that has consumed my life for the last month and a half.
Yeah, it's consumed ours as well. And we really do appreciate your reporting. It's been excellent. I want to start, though, with the Kevin Franke video. So give everybody a little context here. We know that Kevin started the 8 Passengers YouTube channel with Ruby in 2015. It documented their lives with the kids, offering advice on childcare, parenting. Kevin hasn't been criminally charged. As we found out from his attorney, Randy Kester, Kevin apparently been living apart for more than a year from Ruby. Didn't know that his kids were in Ivins. So, Brian, before we get into this video, can you walk us through the context of what we are about to see here?
So Kevin fits into this very uniquely, right? We're still trying to figure out Kevin's involvement in all of this. It's a very unique situation as it pertains to his marriage with Ruby, as you mentioned. There's the at least information out there that they haven't been living together in that Springville home for at least a year. It is mentioned in this body camera video too, which is only about 2 minutes long. We obtained the body camera video from Springville. It shows Kevin getting items back. These items were in question roughly a day or 2 after they went to that Springville home to look for the 2 outstanding children that they couldn't figure out their whereabouts after Ruby Franke was taken into custody.
Okay, so with all that in mind, you're going to see, it's really, really fascinating here, because after Ruby was arrested, he files this report to police saying that his home had been burglarized, some items were missing, and it turns out that Kevin and Ruby's adult daughter, Shari, was the one who took some items from the home, seemingly for safekeeping, returned the items back to police. Now let's take a listen to what Kevin had to say as to those items given back to him.
There you go. Is it all there?
Yes. Yeah, explain to me again why this was not robbery.
Because it's a civil issue. You guys are family. She's been in the house before. You haven't been in the house in a year. She had interest in the items. She didn't take them with the intention to deprive you of them. So theft, that's the theft code. We have to prove intent to deprive you of the items. And that wasn't her intent in having them. So the detective sergeant said that we're not going to charge her for anything.
Okay. I'll have to do some more research on that.
You're welcome to do that. If you want to follow up with our detective, do yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll be here on Tuesday. His name's Sergeant McCoy. Okay. You're welcome. Take care.
All right, what's your reaction to that?
Well, Kevin still asks, how is this not warrant a robbery or a theft charge? To which the officer then has to explain, hey, this doesn't warrant theft because there was no depriving of these items. Shari brought them back, as we understand it, rather quickly. I think the items are the really interesting part, though. What do they entail? There were cameras, there were tablets, there were journals, passports for Kevin, Ruby, and Chad, who is the other, adult child for Ruby Franke. So I thought it was all really interesting about that interaction. Mind you, this is still really fresh in this case. So this video happens just 48 hours basically after Ruby's taken into custody. I can only imagine what's going through Kevin's mind at this point.
Yeah, and assuming, again, that he had no idea what was happening here, that's a lot to take in, and, it's hard to blame him for some of the ways he's been acting. But I do want to ask you, the items, any idea why Shari would have taken these specific items?
No, and the thing that's interesting is if you read some of the other reports from Springville, the day we got the reports about what really took place that day, the following day, and then the third day in question, which is when Kevin got those items back and reported that burglary, we're trying to figure out what other items were really taken from the home. As we understand it, the second day, so the day directly after Ruby was taken into custody, they went to that Springville home with a DCFS worker, with Sherry, with, as they described it, other family members. Police were there to supervise, and basically was to make sure Kevin wasn't there. I'm curious what other items were taken, because the whole goal was to get the personal items for the children, 4 children. It's not clear what she wanted from those items. However, if you spin through some of the comments, yes, I read them, by the way, for those out there that are watching, it's interesting that, what is on those tapes? What are on those cameras? What are in those journals? I think everyone wants to know.
All right, we want to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this video. Life's scary. Minding your own business when it seems that everyone and everything, no matter where you turn, seems to want to hurt you. Okay, maybe that was a bit much, but you get the idea. The point is, you don't have to feel helpless, because Morgan & Morgan, the largest injury law firm in America, is here. Now, before you say, oh, great, another law firm ad, first of all, how dare you speak that way of Morgan & Morgan? And second of all, you don't know what makes them special. You see, Morgan & Morgan has completely modernized the personal injury claim process. They make it super easy for you. How? Well, you submit your claim, you sign contracts, you upload documents, and you talk to your whole legal team all on your phone. And you can text your legal team throughout your case as much as you want, whenever or wherever, about whatever you want. Now, you might be saying that sounds expensive. Well, here's the kicker. There's no upfront fee. No, you only pay them if you win. So it's no wonder over 3 million people call them every year. So if you're injured, you can submit a claim at forthepeople.com/law&crime or by dialing pound law. That's pound 529 on your phone. I tell you, I find his response interesting. Obviously, we're coloring it with the idea of look what he's discovering in the course of those 2 days, but also the idea that seemingly he was surprised charges are not being brought against his daughter. It makes you wonder about the relationship, which we know Shari, one of the adult children, had called 911 in 2022. She had heard that her siblings were being left home alone. It seemed that she cared about them. There seemed to be a falling out between Shari and her parents. What can you tell us there?
The family dynamic is really interesting. I mean, we're not truly sure about all of the events in the timeline, right, of how everything played out. But so much of these kids' lives were put out there for the world to see. So you have to imagine there's probably some level of trauma there, some sort of thing that is sticking with, especially those 2 adult children, Sherry and Chad. It's really unclear how they're gelling together now, because just earlier this week, they all walked into court together and there were smiles. Right. There was even a little bit of laughter. And I didn't expect that. We had a different reporter down there in Provo, which is just south of Salt Lake City. For those of you that don't live in Utah, it's not far, but that's the site where a lot of the child welfare case is being handled, which is sealed. So we're outside. We see them all walk down the steps. I think everyone was surprised, especially after we put this body camera video out there that confirms the police reports that Kevin wanted to press some sort of charges, or at least look into charges against Sherry for taking those items initially. The family dynamic is very interesting. And I don't know if we'll ever really know the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of just how deep this goes. But from the exterior, whether this was a planned thing from Kevin's attorney and Sherry's attorney, they all walked down the steps together and it looked like a lovely family sight.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I read through Kevin Franke's attorney, Randy Kester, that apparently there is some sort of reconciliation between Kevin and Sherry. You saw that, right?
We saw that, and that's also what Kevin's attorney, Randy, said to me after I reached out to him about this body camera video. I told him, hey, we have this interaction. We have these police reports. Is there something you'd like to share with me? Because this is after I had an interview scheduled with Randy, and he pushed it to the side because of the child welfare case, and we haven't been able to reschedule. So he did send me a couple sentences that we did share in our coverage. They said, hey, they're working on these bygones, as he described it. They're trying to basically mend this relationship. And whether it's happened so quickly in a matter of days or weeks, I don't know. But at least it was on display earlier this week when the whole family, at least Kevin, Sherry, and Chad, all came together.
Right.
As it pertains to those 4 children. And by the way, Ruby was also there that day. We didn't see her, but we do know that she was transported from Washington County, which is in southern Utah, hours away, mind you, up to Utah County, being held on a hold for that hearing. So in theory, you'd have to imagine basically most of the family was there that day.
Dynamic, a lot different than it was maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. Okay, let's move on to the other videos here because I think they're fascinating as well. So there is this other body cam video. It's from Springville Police, and it's after the kids, the 2 children, are found in Ivins. Police then swarm the Ruby Franke family home, making sure that none of the Franke children were there.
You two stay on that corner. Police department!
So, Brian, according to police, the Springville home was empty. What do we know about that? Not a raid, but swarming to try to check in. Where are the kids?
So to be clear with you, we at KUTV didn't have that exact body camera video of Springville breaking the door open, going into the home and looking throughout. I know the video you're talking about, though. We know that they tried to look in the windows. They tried to see if anybody was home, and they had a search warrant, as we've seen. I haven't seen the search warrant because it's part of the sealed documents, but it is out there somewhere. And they went into the home, obviously didn't find anything, which really set off a kind of countywide search for these 2 children, which involved Springville reaching out to other agencies. And that's where this nearly 3-hour-long body camera lives that we put out there recently from American Fork, which is basically a neighboring town, which is where they ultimately found those 2 children in the homes of another individual.
Let's talk about that. So police later located Franke's other children at the home of another woman with connections to Jodi Hildebrandt's business. Her name is Pam Botcher in American Fork, Utah, as you said. And the American Fork police, they put Botcher in handcuffs. They lead her to the back of a police car while they waited for the Springville police to arrive.
She's Franke's daughter.
Okay.
She's a friend of ours. She comes over and helps me every once in a while to do cleaning and stuff.
Because she knows her mom. She's very good friends with her, has known her for a long, long time.
Brian, what do you make of that?
Well, that's one clip of nearly 3 hours that I combed through the other day. So I can say it's definitely one that stands out. What's interesting about Pam, we put out some reporting on Pam early on in this. We noticed that she was on the Connections Classroom website. When I spoke with Jodi Hildebrandt over a month ago now, Jesse told me about Pam and how that fits into all of this. So it was only a matter of time before we found out more information about Pam. Pam has not been arrested. Pam has not been charged. She is not in any of the documents pertaining to this as far as court proceedings that we see publicly right now. But that's where the children were located that day. Pam, as far as we understand it, started off as a family friend of Jodi Hildebrandt's. She mentions in this body camera, I've known Ruby about 3 years or so. She was just a member of Connections. Pam really in this clip couldn't answer what Connections is, which I think a lot of people found interesting considering she's listed on that website, which I believe is still active, as president of the Connections Foundation. So it wasn't, all of it was life skills, right? That's kind of where she kept going to.
Let's play that real quick. So again, this is her talking. Again, she's a team member on the Connections Classroom website. This is her briefly explaining that.
How did you start to know the family? How did you guys meet?
The Franke family?
Yeah.
Through a program called Connections.
Oh,
It's a kind of a life skills type of thing.
Yeah, Brian, like you said, it's not entirely clear what Connections is.
Yeah, it's very interesting because she's clearly been involved in Connections for a while. I mean, at least 5, 6, 7 years. We've gone through some of the tax filings. We've kind of looked at these things because Connections Foundation was a spinoff from Connections Classroom, classified as a nonprofit organization, so they could accept charitable donations and such. the whole thing is very interesting about how the DCFS worker asks Pam about connections. And to me, I'm watching this. I go, oh, please ask one more question. Please ask one more question.
It's the reporter in you.
Step further.
Yeah.
Well, right. I'm hoping for that one moment where we go, oh, it all makes sense now. But to get back to your original point, it's very interesting when you see Pam's husband say, oh, I don't really know Ruby. Pam knows her. And I think there's that interesting divide between maybe what we're seeing with some of the people involved in this case is maybe they're not sharing as much with some of the people even closest to them as you'd like to think that's involved in a family dynamic.
That's so interesting. And yeah, look, when we interviewed Randy Kester, I recall him saying that seemed to suggest that there was a manipulation going on the part and putting the blame on Jodi Hildebrandt and how that changed the family dynamic of the Frankes. I want to continue on with this, though. So in this video, police officers and DCFS, Department of Child and Family Services, they kind of had a hard time figuring out exactly where all the children were and when.
So just to make sure I'm understanding all this correctly, Ruby contacted you around noon and said that they had an
around, I don't know if that's exact.
That's your best guess.
Said she had a family emergency.
And needed you to pick up the girls.
Yeah, she said, would you mind watching the girls while I'm gone? Because she was leaving. I said, yeah, I could do that because I need some help cleaning.
Okay, and then did she say to bring them to your house for today and then take it back home tonight, or to keep them here for a couple days?
She didn't say. I was just planning on bringing them home tonight.
So, Brian, what is your reaction to that response? And how do we know what all ended up happening with respect to the children that were at Botcher's residence?
It's interesting because Botcher mentions cleaning about 1,000 times in this 3 video. They were here to clean. They were here to clean up. We have visitors coming into town. It's very interesting that I kept going back to that subject. She did talk about a number of things they did that day. I mean, she said that Ruby asked her to pick up her children. She explained where they were. We haven't been putting out the locations for the security of the children. I mean, they work in the community and we're trying to be respectful of that. And they were, she picked them up in one town. Then she drove to another town. Then they went to go get ice cream or some snack of some sort. Then they came back and spent the afternoon and started cleaning the house. And as they describe in this video, then they were going to go pick some tomatoes and make salsa. Like it was this very wholesome, like family thing going on there. And I think what we make of this is, how much of it is truly forthcoming, right? How much of it is just kind of surface level stuff? And did Pam at that time know what was happening to Ruby? I mean, a family emergency is about as blanket statement as you can imagine, right? I'd imagine if these two were friends or pretty close and you're taking in my children, maybe at some point in that quick phone call is, hey, some of my children are in trouble. I might be in trouble. I mean, I'm just curious to know if any of that was ever mentioned in the text messages or the phone call between Ruby and Pam as it pertained to the well-being of her other children.
And we know that the two girls at that home and the two children that were found, they were all taken into state custody. And that's now being separated and litigated on a separate kind of case. In terms of Ruby and Jodi, you've been following it. What is next for the case? What can we expect in the weeks or months to come? And what are you looking out for?
I've been constantly reaching out to both attorneys, right? So Lamar Windward, the attorney for Ruby Franke, and Doug Terry, the attorney for Jodi Hildebrandt. We're about 4.5, 5 hours from them physically here in Salt Lake City to St. George. In our TV market, we do cover the whole side, the whole state. It's very taxing when you put the mileage on. But it's one of those things that we've just kind of been waiting. At last we heard October 5th. It is now much later in October. Still no scheduled court hearing. Still no, next step in the very long process. As you know, in the line of work that you do, these can take years to finally come to fruition. Oh, I was very surprised because I figured that we would at least have something on the calendar now. As we stand today, there is a court hearing on the calendar for Ruby Franke. It's coming up next month, but it has to do with a speeding infraction in Ivins, Utah, about 6 days before all of this went down, maybe 5 days. I was surprised to see, of all things, that's on the calendar right now, but not this higher profile, nationwide, worldwide conversation about what is happening with these child abuse allegations against this very high profile YouTuber and her business partner that has this very interesting business dynamic relationship thing. I think we're all just waiting to see what happens next. I've been asking those questions, haven't been getting a lot of answers, to be very frank with you.
I will tell you, though, I encourage everybody to check Brian out because your reporting on this has been tremendous, and we're always trying to learn a little bit more details through the cracks. Even if there's not an official court hearing, we are learning new details. So Brian Schnee, anchor reporter from KUTV 2 News, I encourage everybody to check him out. Brian, thanks so much for taking the time. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We very much appreciate it. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.